Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I pulled out my Doodlebug The Great Outdoors collection, as well as this sketch from Scrapbook Generation. I will link it below. It is a free sketch. I really wanted to document these photos of Malachi and Eli on the fishing boat. My grandfather took them fishing last summer, and he passed away in November, and I was just in the mood to document something about him. That's why I pulled these photos out, and I knew that the Doodlebug Great Outdoor collection would be perfect for these photos. Now, I've used this collection a ton, and I have a playlist for this collection because I do have quite a few layouts with this collection, and I really have used it a lot for fishing stuff, and I didn't have a lot of fishing pieces left, but I'm going to show you here in just a minute how I changed that up and was able to get a lot more embellishments for this collection. The last time I used this collection, I took out all of the petite prints and put them with the rest of my petite prints. I figured that I needed to see exactly how much of this collection I had left because I did have quite a bit of the petite prints left. And I knew that I could pull those petite prints out at any time. I'm trying to find a border strip for this layout. I really wanted to use that really busy plaid paper, and I usually only use that in 1/4 inch. But having a large piece on the right hand side was kind of throwing me off because I didn't know what size 1/4 inch to use on the top and bottom if I'm using the paper that I usually use, the 1/4 inch strip. So I left all this in to show you that it's not always easy. I first started out with the 3 greens, which is limeade, grasshopper, and citrus. But none of those were working for me. I then moved over to the browns and tried to find a piece that would work. And I ultimately do end up with the linen paper. I felt like that gave it enough contrast against that really busy plaid. I did pull in these embellishments from Paper House. I thought that I would be able to use them with this layout, but I go in a completely different way. I'm still trying not to use white background as much as possible. So I did look through my brown and I found this basil paper that is called 2 Scoops. It has textured polka dots on it, and I bought a ton of it for 2 reasons. 1, I love the color and I thought that I could get a lot of use out of it. And 2, I think it was on clearance at Michael's, which is always a great reason to buy plain cardstock, right? So I'm following the sketch pretty closely. On the left-hand side of the layout, I'm going to have 2 4x6 photos, and then I'm going to have a 4x12 piece of paper at the top, which is the fish paper. Then the right hand side of the layout calls for an 8x12 sheet of paper, which is going to be that plaid paper. I've used this sketch quite a bit, and I love the fact that you're able to get large size photos. I was able to get 4 4x6 photos, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. On the top, I did add 2 4x4 photos, but I do eventually end up cutting those down because I plan to mat them. So now I've gotten the paper and the photos down, and I'm going to add that 1/4 inch strip to the top and bottom. You guys know that I cannot cut a 1/4 inch strip straight, no matter how many times I've tried. I have gotten it down to the point where at least 2 of the 1/4 inch strips are the same size, so I tend to make sure that I have the 2 that are the same size on the bottom and then the 2 that are on the same size at the top. But all 4 of these 1/4 inch strips are never the same size. I am using some roll of adhesive that I got from scrapbook.com. I will link it below for you guys if you'd like to check it out. I really enjoy using these rolled adhesives because they are the perfect width for these 1/4 inch strips. And they're just a little bit thinner than the ATG that I use on most layouts. Once I got the paper down, I realized that I wanted to mat my photos. Luckily, because there is textured on the background paper, the paper came up pretty easily. I decided that I would mount the 2 photos that are going to be on the right-hand side of the layout together with the background paper. So I adhered the photos to the background paper and then used my layering guides to cut out the edges around the photos. This gives me a perfect layer, and it allows me to cut into the center of a piece of paper. Sometimes I struggle with going far enough, so I usually end up having to cut the corners of my photo mats as well. Once I got it cut out, I then added the plaid paper back down and I added some washi tape to the back of the layout. This just helps when I'm putting it into my album so it doesn't get caught on the other side of the layout. I also made the decision to trim down the 4x4 photos on the left-hand side, and then I use the same technique of cutting out the center pieces to map my photos. Once I get all the paper down, plus the washi tape on the back of the layout, I laid my photos on top of the fish paper and almost immediately realized that it wasn't going to work because they were going to be overlapping on the background paper. I decided to take a break from that and just move on and figure it out later. So I decided to adhere the photos on the right-hand side of the layout. I did pull out my T-square ruler to make sure that they were straight, and I did add them flat to the layout. For some reason, it did not look straight. I ended up pulling up the photos and looking at it again. I held the layout up. I even pulled out my Omni ruler, and it was showing that it was straight, but to my eye, it did not look straight. I think it was because of the grid paper in the background was just throwing me off. But you guys can see that I spent a pretty significant amount of time looking at these photos, trying to really confirm that they were straight. I think I've mentioned this in a previous layout, but Lori Whitlock does have a website where you can print out some of the embellishments for the Doodlebug collections. I do believe that she designs for Doodlebug, and so that's why they're available on her site. So I did decide to print out a ton of fishes because I'm going to be using them on the layout, and I sent them over to my Silhouette. As they were cutting out, I figured out that I would mount the two photos that are on the left-hand side on white cardstock instead of the background paper. So I just pulled out my layering guides to trim those down while all of my fish embellishments were being cut out on the Silhouette. So you can send these images through your Silhouette print and cut features. I downloaded them from Lori's website, and I did add a white border to them so that they would match the images that come in the collection. The coloring is a little off from the images that are in the collection itself. So I was going to pull in some images from the collection, but I decided that since the coloring was a little off, I would just go ahead and print everything that I needed to use for this layout so that they all matched. The sketch calls for a bunch of stars on the right-hand side of the layout, and I thought that that would be perfect to add the fish instead of the stars. I also love the fact that I was able to cut out a fishing pole that fit perfectly on the left-hand side of the layout. This fishing pole is a lot larger than what comes in the collection, so I love the fact that I'm able to size them to fit my layouts and really work for what I am using. You guys know that I started using Kelly Bell Designs digital collections last year for my Disney collections, and it really has opened up my eyes in regards to the ability to use digital collections with traditional scrapbooking. So I really like the fact that if I have a collection that I like, maybe I have a ton of paper still left, but some of the embellishments that I need for my layouts aren't available because maybe I've already used them, or maybe they're not the size that I really want them to be. I can purchase them digitally and then using my Silhouette and the print and cut feature, cut out as many embellishments as I want. I know for a fact that there were not this many fish in the collection. So even if I wanted to do this layout as a first layout when I got the collection, I still wouldn't have had enough fish. I did also purchase the bucket of fish and the bucket of worms. I thought that they would be really cute as an anchor on either side of the fishes in the center of the layout. In hindsight, I kind of wish that I would have mirrored the fish so that they were swimming towards the bucket of fish as opposed to swimming towards the worms. But it's kind of cute too because it almost is like they are trying to get the worms. So I think that they would have been cute either way. I did pull out the mini icons to see if there were any embellishments that I could add. I did add a couple, but as you can see, there is a fishing pole in the mini icons, and you can see the size difference between the mini icons and the one that I ended up using on my layout. I ended up adding a couple of the tiny little worms as well as the hooks. And then I decided that I would add some stitching to this layout. I first started out with the bucket of fish, and I just did a line at the top of the bucket, and I decided that I would also do the bucket of worms. Then I'm going to add a straight line on the top and bottom of the layout right above my 1/4 inch strip. I really like using this Tim Holtz ruler because it does have a grip on the bottom of it, and you can pick this up at scrapbook.com. I do have a link for it below. I had the original Tim Holtz ruler and it was really nice, but it did slip often. With this rubber grip on the bottom, it helps so much to prevent it from slipping. As I was putting the stitching down, I took a look at that fishing pole and I was like, it needs some stitching as well. And I think that this stitching is perfect. I poked the holes on the line part of the fishing rod. So once I stitched it, it looks like there is fishing line on this fishing pole. I did pull out the gray thread for the fishing pole as well as the lines in my buckets. And then I pulled out a brown to match the brown 1/4 inch strip that I'm going to be using on the layout. I do separate my threads into 3, so I just divide it in half. And then I started my stitching on the bottom part of the layout. I do my stitching offline. Usually I watch TV while I am stitching. And so I did do that off camera, but I slowed the video down here so that you could see that row of stitching, that beautiful stitching on the fishing pole, as well as the row of stitching on the right-hand side of the layout, and that bucket. And then I did decide to add the stitching to some of the fish. I just was kind of excited about the stitching and thought that it would be super cute. For the top right-hand side of the layout, the sketch does call for some banners, and I have really been enjoying using the mini tags from the 6x6 paper pad, so I pulled those out for this layout as well. I decided that I was going to use the back sides of them, and I really wanted to stick with the brown, orange, and blue. I did add in a yellow as well. There are 5 tags in total, so I thought that having the yellow in the center with a brown on either side of it, and then the orange and blue on the very end, would really tie in all of the colors. I did do it at a little bit of an angle, so I am just making sure that the tags fit where I want them to on the layout, and then I'm going to cut off the excess that is hanging over the edge. I then decided that I would try to figure out how my title would work before I cut them off, just to make sure that I like the way that it was going to look. My title is going to be Gone Fishing. I know, it's an amazing title that you guys would never have guessed was going to be on this layout, right? Sometimes you just go with the simplest things. I did decide to put the word gone up on fun foam. I did have a row of fishes and they just fit perfectly on those tags, so I went ahead and added them to the top. They are different than my print and cut fishes, but I feel like they're far enough away from each other on the layout that it doesn't really matter. I then pulled out this thread, and I have hung on to this thread for quite a while. It's a 2-tone thread, so most of them are a solid color with a white. So there's a yellow with a white, an orange with a white, and a blue with a white. But then I also do have some that are a little bit different, like there is one that has orange and brown. So I decided to match the thread up with the tag hole center. So at the top of the tags are the tag toppers, and then there's the hole reinforcers, and that was the color that I was matching. So for the yellow one, the hole reinforcer is blue, so I used the blue and white thread on that piece. Once I got them all on, I then decided to cut them down, and they all are different lengths. Over on the left-hand side of the layout, I added this little tag here that says Adventure Awaits. I feel like it closed in some of that trap space between the photos themselves. And then I also added another little hook. I think that's called a fly hook, but I don't know a lot about fishing, so I'm not exactly sure. Over on the right-hand side, I added a word phrase that said Memories, and then I also decided to add a tab at the top on the left that says Family. I then felt like I needed to kind of build up that cluster a little bit, so I did end up adding a map, and then I added a little cooler. The photo on the right-hand side, you can see a cooler in the photo, so obviously they had a cooler on the boat, so I thought, why not add a cooler to my embellishments as well? And of course, if you're going to have a cooler, you're going to have drinks, so I added 2 little soda cans. I added one on the left-hand side and then one in the title cluster as well. And then I found this little sign that points to fishing one way and camping the other, and they're not really camping here, but I just thought it was really cute for that little cluster. I then added some hearts to the clusters on the left as well as the right hand side, as well as a couple of little flowers. I thought that even if this is a boy layout, the flowers are small enough and it just ties in additional color. I then pulled out the enamel dots for this collection and I added some to each one of the clusters. The enamel dots don't really stick really well, so I did have to use some liquid adhesive on the backs of them just to make sure that they stayed down. So I want to encourage you guys to take a look at Lori Whitlock's website. I will link her below. She has a ton of digital embellishments that would work for lots of different Doodlebug collections. So if you're running low on your Doodlebug embellishment pieces, or if maybe you find a great deal on a 6x6 paper pad or some of the clearance pieces and you just were able to find the paper, make sure you check out her website because you may be able to bulk up some of those collections with the digital collections that she has available on her website. All right, that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I did do my journaling offline and it said, Granddaddy decided to take Eli and Malachi on an exciting fishing trip. He chartered a private boat and the boys had a great time catching some impressive sized fish. All right, if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching and I hope that you have a scrappy day.